Welcome to the Fashion Pattern Lab.
Here I am using glazed cotton fabric for run and fell seam. Run and fell seam strong and durable होती है और लाइट वेट टू मीडियम वेट फैब्रिक्स में यूज होती है, लेकिन ये सीम बहुत कॉमनली यूज नहीं होती. I will explain the reason for this towards the end of this video. Let's start with the planning process or structure of the seam. This is the first layer of the fabric and here is the second layer of the fabric. ध्यान देंगे यहाँ फैब्रिक छोटा बड़ा नहीं है, मैंने सीम अलाउंस रिक्वायरमेंट के अकॉर्डिंग ली है. इस पार्ट को कंस्ट्रक्शन प्रोसेस में और ध्यान से समझेंगे. फॉर नाउ लेट्स मूव ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट स्टेप. Start by opening up the seam. You will notice it looks like this. Next, fold the seam allowance of the first layer onto the second layer like this. Repeat this step again, folding the seam allowance of the first layer onto the second layer. Similar like before, here is your first stitch line. To finish the seam, add a top stitch along the corner through both layers. Moving on to the construction process. I want to start by saying that in the fashion industry, there is no trimming away of fabric when sewing run and fell seam. Patterns are always created with the actual seam allowance amounts needed on each side of the seam. मैंने बहुत स्टूडेंट्स को देखा है, वो पहले सुपर इम्पोज सीम लगाते हैं और फिर एक लेयर की सीम अलाउंस कट कर देते हैं. This method is incorrect. Unfortunately, I have seen some teachers explain it this way as well. Let me clarify, this approach is wasteful of fabric. In the fashion industry, we aim to make the most efficient use of the fabric as possible. Okay, back to the right method. These are two layers of the fabric. This is the wrong side of the fabric. Mark a 0.5 cm seam allowance on one layer and a 1 cm seam allowance on the second layer. अब फैब्रिक को राइट साइड टू राइट साइड फेस करके रखेंगे और प्लेन सीम लगा देंगे. प्लीज रिमेंबर टू लॉक द सीम एट बोथ इन द बिगिनिंग एंड इन द एंड. अब इस तरह सीम अलाउंस को फोल्ड करेंगे, वन फोल्ड देन सेकंड फोल्ड. अब बिल्कुल कॉर्नर पर टॉप सीम लगानी है, बट उससे पहले आयरन कर लेंगे और इस सीम के लिए बेटर है कि आप अच्छे से क्रीज बना लें और पिंस यूज करना अवॉइड करें. नेक्स्ट, टॉप सीम एट द कॉर्नर वेरी प्रिसाइजली. And this is the final look. But wait, let me explain the difference between run and fell seam and a lapped seam. This is the back side of both seams and this is the right side of both seams. You can see the difference in how both seam lines look from the front. Both seams are strong and durable. A lapped seam is suitable for heavy fabrics and can also be used for decorative purposes. On the other hand, a run and fell seam is versatile and can be used for various fabrics, from lightweight to medium weight fabrics. And here is why this type of seam is not commonly used. As a result of this folding and stitching, one side of the seam has an extra layer of fabric, which makes it appear slightly raised or thicker than the other side. Run and fell seams are often used in clothing where aesthetics are less important than strength and durability. Thanks for watching Fashion Pattern Lab till the end.